Okay, so have you ever noticed that when you're speaking English, you get stuck, like translating in your head?
Yeah.
It could be a real roadblock to becoming more fluent. But don't worry.
Right.
In this deep dive, we're going to break down how to think directly in English.
Yeah.
And we've got some great insights from language coach Alex to guide us.
Yeah, for sure.
Are you ready to ditch the translator?
I am ready. Let's do it.
Awesome. So, first of all, why do we even do this? Like, why do we translate in our heads?
It's totally natural. You know, our brains, they're wired for connections. They want to relate anything new, like English, to something we already know, like your native language. Yeah. So you're learning English, your brain's like, oh, I got this. I'll just translate it.
Right.
But that can make things tricky.
Yeah, because it's almost like it's not a direct translation.
Exactly. Not at all. I mean, languages, they're not just like word for word swaps, right?
Right, yeah.
And English, well, it has its own quirks, its own rhythm, and those can get lost in translation. Yeah. You might end up with sentences that are grammatically correct,
right,
but they just sound a little off.
Yeah, they sound a little weird.
Yeah.
I've definitely had that experience where I've tried to translate everything perfectly in my head, and then I say it out loud, and I'm like, oh, that
totally
right there.
Yeah, it's like you're trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
The good news is you can absolutely train your brain to think directly in English. It's not about like erasing your native language or anything. Right. It's more like building a new pathway in your brain.
I like that. Okay, so how do we start building that new pathway?
Well, Alex suggests a really simple step. Embrace simplicity.
Okay.
Instead of getting lost in complicated grammar or trying to find like the perfect word, just start with really basic English sentences.
So instead of me like thinking in my head like, I would like a cup of coffee, please.
Right.
I should just think, I want coffee.
Exactly. It might feel almost too basic at first, but those core phrases, they're the foundation.
Got it.
You can't build a skyscraper on a shaky base, right?
Okay, so we're like laying the groundwork for like more complicated sentences later. But what happens when I hit a word that I don't know?
Okay, well, instead of getting stuck, just use the words you do know to kind of paint a picture, like a verbal game of charades.
So if I don't know the word for remote control, I could say the thing that changes the TV channels.
Exactly. It keeps the conversation flowing in English, and that's what we want. And it's actually similar to how kids learn language. They learn by observing, by experimenting, by describing. They don't have a dictionary in their heads to translate from.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so we talked about embracing simplicity.
Yes.
But you mentioned this idea of visual thinking. What is that all about?
Okay, so this is where we go beyond words and we tap into the power of images. So instead of translating a word in your head, you just conjure up a mental picture. So if you want to say tree, don't think of the word for tree in your native language. Just imagine a big oak tree.
Gotcha.
With spreading branches.
So we're kind of making a shortcut.
Exactly.
In our brains.
A direct connection.
Yeah, instead of going through that translation process.
Yeah.
So is that what native speakers do?
Yeah. They've built that association over years and years of exposure. When they see a tree boom, the word tree just pops into their mind.
Wow.
And we can cultivate that same instinct with practice.
So how do we start doing that? I mean, we can't just be thinking about trees all day.
Right. Well, that's where daily immersion comes in.
Okay.
It's about making English a constant companion throughout your day. And Alex recommends something really simple. Narrate your actions in English, even if it's just silently in your head.
Okay, so if I'm like making dinner, I can be like, I'm chopping vegetables or I'm stirring the sauce.
Exactly. It's like creating this running commentary in English, and the more you do it, the more natural it becomes.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm already kind of doing it in my head now. It's really interesting. I think a big thing for a lot of people, though, is that they're afraid to make mistakes.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. But mistakes are unavoidable. They're part of learning anything.
Right.
I mean, think about little kids learning to talk. They're constantly stumbling over words. They mispronounce things. But it doesn't stop them from trying.
Yeah, they just keep going. So it's like we need to reframe
our thinking
about mistakes.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a failure.
It's feedback.
Yeah, it's a stepping stone
Exactly.
to fluency. And you know what? Most people are more forgiving than we think.
Oh, way more forgiving.
They just want to understand.
Yeah, they want to communicate
what you're trying to say.
Exactly.
So we've got to let go of that perfectionism.
Yeah.
And just speak. And speaking of immersing ourselves,
yes,
Alex also talks about the importance of surrounding yourself with English as much as possible.
Oh, for sure. Create an environment where English is everywhere. Listen to podcasts like this one. Watch movies, read books, even change your phone settings to English.
I like that one. Because then you're just like
I'm
constantly
surrounded.
surrounded by it.
Yeah, and the more you're exposed, the more comfortable you become.
Right.
You're training your ear, you're training your brain.
So we talked about embracing simplicity, visual thinking,
Yeah.
narrating your actions, viewing mistakes as opportunities,
Yeah.
and immersing ourselves in English. That's a lot.
That's a great toolkit.
Yeah. But how long does all this take?
You know, it's a journey, not a destination. There's no magic formula.
Right.
It takes time and it takes effort.
Like anything new.
Exactly. And the key is to enjoy the process.
Have fun.
Have fun. If you approach it with curiosity and a willingness to learn, you'll get there.
I like that. So to all of our listeners out there, if you're feeling trapped in that translation loop, take a deep breath.
You got this.
You got this. And remember, ditch the translator and start thinking in English.
Yeah. And here's something to think about. If visual thinking can help us learn languages, could it also be a powerful tool for learning other things? New skills, hobbies, problem solving. It's something to ponder. But let's pick this up in the next part of our deep dive, where we'll explore some other really fascinating aspects of this journey.
Sounds good.
It really makes you think, like, could visual thinking work for more than just languages?
Yeah, it's a cool idea. So we've been talking about rewiring our brains to think in English. What's actually happening there?
Well, it all comes down to neuroplasticity. That's this amazing ability of our brains to adapt and change and form new connections throughout our lives. So every time we practice these techniques, we're strengthening those English thinking pathways.
It's like we're working out.
Yeah, like a mental gym.
Yeah, but it's not just about passively absorbing information, right?
Right, it's got to be active. Like you're not just watching Netflix, you're actually using the language.
Got it. So immersion is important.
Yes.
But we also have to practice.
Let's practice.
Yeah. But there's another piece to this puzzle too, right? Like, what about our mindset?
Mindset is huge. You have to believe that you can think in English.
Yeah, like if you don't believe it.
It's going to be tough.
Yeah. Have there been studies on this, like how mindset affects language learning?
Oh, yeah. There's this one study that's fascinating. Researchers took a group of language learners and they divided them in half. And they told one group, you guys are naturally good at languages.
Whoa.
And the other group, they didn't say anything. And guess what? The group that got that positive message, they actually performed better.
Really? Just from hearing that?
Just from hearing that. Their beliefs kind of unlocked their potential.
That's wild. So how do we, like, cultivate that positive mindset?
It starts with noticing that negative self-talk.
Oh, yeah. The I'm terrible like this.
Exactly. Catch yourself when you have those thoughts and challenge them. Replace them with something positive like, I'm learning, I'm getting better every day.
So it's like switching from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset.
Exactly. You got to embrace the challenges as opportunities.
I like that.
Yeah.
But it's hard to stay positive sometimes, you know, when you hit those bumps in the road.
Oh, for sure. That's why it's important to celebrate those small wins.
Yeah.
Every time you express yourself clearly in English, give yourself a pat on the back, acknowledge that progress.
You're building momentum.
Yes, you're creating this positive feedback loop.
Right. And it makes the journey more enjoyable too, right?
Absolutely. And that's another thing Alex really emphasizes. Learning English should be fun.
Not a chore.
Not a chore. If you're dreading it, you're not going to stick with it.
Right.
But if you're enjoying it, it becomes something you look forward to.
It's like going to the gym versus doing something you love.
Exactly. If you hate going to the gym, you're going to find excuses not to go.
Oh, yeah. Every time.
But if you find an activity you love, you're going to do it all the time.
Yeah. So for English, what does that look like?
Well, think about the things you enjoy. Music, movies, books, chatting with friends.
Yeah.
Find ways to incorporate English into those activities.
So like instead of reading a textbook, I could listen to my favorite band.
Exactly. You're still immersing yourself, but you're having fun while you're doing it.
I like that. And as you get more comfortable, you'll naturally start thinking in English more.
It'll become less of an effort and more of an automatic thing.
It's like learning to ride a bike.
Perfect analogy. At first, you're wobbly, you're concentrating on every move.
Yeah.
But with practice, it becomes second nature.
You just hop on and go.
Exactly. And thinking in English, it might feel a little scary at first.
Yeah.
But with practice and patience and a positive attitude, you can totally do it.
That's encouraging. So we've talked about why we translate the how-to and the mindset.
The whole package.
Yeah. But before we move on, I want to circle back to that question you asked earlier.
Oh, about visual thinking.
Yeah. Could it be useful for learning other skills?
It's a really interesting question. We've seen how associating words with images can create that shortcut in the brain.
Right.
So could we apply that same principle to other things?
Like, let's say you're learning to play an instrument.
Okay.
Instead of just reading the notes, could you imagine the sounds they make?
Exactly. Or if you're learning a dance move, could you visualize the steps instead of just listening to the instructions? It's fascinating to think about.
Yeah, like maybe there's this deeper connection between visualization and learning.
It could be a whole new way of unlocking our potential.
I like that.
Yeah.
But for now, let's shift gears a bit
Okay.
and talk about the importance of embracing authentic English content. Okay, so we've been talking about immersing ourselves in English, but what does that actually look like?
It's about surrounding yourself with authentic English content, like the real deal. Think of it like learning to cook Italian food.
Okay.
You wouldn't just read recipes right.
Right.
You'd want to taste the food, smell the herbs and spices, maybe even visit Italy
Right.
and experience the culture firsthand.
Gotcha. So it's like going beyond the textbook. So how do we do that with English?
Well, you could try watching movies or TV shows without subtitles.
Okay. Listen podcasts like this one. Of course. Read books or articles written by native speakers.
Yeah.
Even something as simple as changing your phone's language settings can make a difference.
Oh, that's a good one. So it's about making English like a part of your life.
Exactly.
Not just something you study. And I guess that also helps you pick up on all those little nuances.
Right. All the idioms, the humor,
Yeah.
the slang.
Yeah, like the stuff that makes it sound natural.
Exactly. You start to absorb the rhythm of the language.
Yeah.
And not just the language, but also the culture behind it.
That's what I find so interesting. Like learning a language, it's not just about the words.
Yeah.
It's like a window into a whole different way of thinking.
Absolutely. Languages are connected to culture, history, values.
Yeah.
When you start thinking in another language, you start seeing the world from a new perspective.
It's like even just simple things like how people express emotions.
Yeah.
Or structure their thoughts. It can be totally different.
Oh, yeah. And those differences can lead to all sorts of misunderstandings.
Right. If we're not careful. But when we embrace those differences,
Yeah.
it makes our communication richer.
I like that. It's like that saying, the world is a book, and those who do not travel read only one page.
I love that. And learning a language, it's like adding a whole new chapter to that book.
It's like we're expanding our world.
Exactly. It challenges our assumptions, pushes us out of our comfort zones.
But it all comes back to connection, right?
Yes.
We learn languages to connect with people.
With ideas.
With the world around us.
And when you can connect in another language,
it opens up so many possibilities.
It really does. Well, this has been such an insightful deep dive. We've learned so much.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
From why we translate in our heads to how to break free.
We talked about visual thinking,
mindset,
authentic content.
It's been a great journey. So to wrap things up, remember to embrace simplicity.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Use those visual thinking techniques.
Those are powerful.
Narrate your actions in English.
Make it a habit.
And don't be afraid of those mistakes. They're just stepping stones.
Exactly. And most importantly, surround yourself with authentic English content.
Yeah, the real deal.
And believe in yourself.
You got this.
You can do this. So to all of our listeners out there, happy learning, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.